Welcome back. So today I'm going to start with a question now. So the question is, you need to match the following, and that is based on what we discussed in the last class. Look here. So we spoke about these organelles, right? Lysosomes, smooth endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi. So these are the organelles and the functions. So look at this and match which function matches with which organelle. And you can pause it here and then you can start. Okay. So if you have answered lysosomes help eating up the worn out organelle, you are right. And then SCR, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, you have answered it helps in lipid synthesis, that is right too. Then Golgi, help in packaging and distribution. So if you have answered all the three, good going. So let's move on. So let's go and discuss about the next few organelles which are very important for the cell. So let's talk about mitochondria. I'm sure you would have heard about this before, right? See how mitochondria looks? It is so weird, you know, this is a weird organelle, and it's one of the important organelle too, because it has a lot of important functions. In fact, the mitochondria is also called the powerhouse of the cell. So the powerhouse, which means, you know, it powers the entire cell. If the cell has to work, it needs energy, right? So for you to do any work, you require energy. And where you are getting that energy from? You think you are getting it from the food you eat, but then the food inside the body, once it enters into your body, into the cells, the mitochondria work on that and they release energy, and that energy is what is helping you to do whatever you're doing today. So you should thank your mitochondria for that. So the mitochondria are called the powerhouses. Why I'm calling them weird organelles? You know, the reason is they have a double membrane. Until now we have discussed endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi, all of them have one membrane around it. But this is very different. So this has two membranes, as you can see in the picture, right? So the outer membrane is like smooth with little pores here and there, but then the inner membrane is a bit weird. So it is like folded into these kind of extensions which are known as cristae. Normally they call them as cristae. So why this inner membrane is folded? Because it will increase the surface area. So if it is straight, right, the surface area is less. If it is folded, there's a lot of membrane here, right? If you separate it, it's a lot of membrane. So the surface area is higher. So what way it will help? More surface area, more energy. And you know that energy is released mitochondria, by mitochondria in the form of a structure or in the form of a molecule called as ATP, right? So more the surface area, more would be the ATP, and more the ATP means more the energy. So that's why ATP is called as energy currency of the cell. I'm sure you would have heard about this term, right? Energy currency. Why is it called currency? Because what is currency? It's nothing but money, right? So whenever you want to buy something, you give the money and get it. Similarly, wherever you want energy, you give ATP and then you get the energy. Okay, so that's why it is called energy currency of the cell. Now what is the full form of ATP? So full form of ATP is adenosine triphosphate. A long word, isn't it? Adenosine triphosphate. T means tri, P means phosphate, A is adenosine. So adenosine triphosphate, that is produced by the on this membrane foldings which are there. And apart from that, it is also weird, not only because it has two membranes, but it has its own DNA. Very surprisingly, you will find that there is a separate DNA inside the cell, and then you will also find some ribosomes here and there. Okay, so that is very surprising. So this organelle has its own DNA, little bit of DNA, and though the DNA looks like a prokaryotic DNA, and then it has ribosomes, which are places where the proteins are made, which means mitochondria can make some proteins on its own, you know. So that is the speciality of the mitochondria. So the respiration, the cellular respiration, right, where the glucose is broken down to release oxygen and carbon dioxide and energy in the form of ATP, happening inside mitochondria. So, it is the seat of aerobic respiration in eukaryotic cells. Aerobic respiration happens in mitochondria. So, that releases lot of energy in the form of ATP. So, which can be used to do work, any work, right? So, for example, movement, whatever work you do, right, it requires energy. Even while eating, you need to move your hands, right? Even that requires energy. So, all that energy comes only from mitochondria. So, let's just summarize those points about mitochondria, which is called the powerhouse of the cell. So, as you can see here, right. So, the membrane has two, this mitochondria has two membranes, and it has the second membrane is, inner membrane is folded to increase the surface area. Then you can see that these folds increase the surface area for ATP, and then the energy is released by this, when energy is required for various chemical activities needed for life, and it's released by the mitochondria in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Okay, and ATP is known as energy currency of the cell. So, the body uses this energy stored in the ATP for making new chemical compounds, or for any mechanical work it does, it needs energy that is supplied by the ATP only. So, and mitochondria are strange because they have their own DNA and they have their own ribosomes. So, that is what makes it a little weird. Okay. So, that is the reason why mitochondria are able to make some of their own proteins, because they have ribosomes and DNA. So, sometimes they call this mitochondria as semi-autonomous organelle. Semi-autonomous because it is able to make some proteins on its own without the nucleus or without directions from the nuclear DNA. Okay. So, this is about the mitochondria. So, see the ATP. What ATP does for you? It supplies you with lots of energy. So, whenever you want ATP, thank your mitochondria for producing enough ATP. You are able to do all this work. Okay. And then apart from that, let us now also talk about one more organelle apart from mitochondria. Maybe this one, this organelle is also a little weird, because it is similar to mitochondria in various ways. Okay. So, what do you see here? You see the beautiful leaves here. So, these leaves, of different colors, isn't it? Some of them are green, some of them are orangish, some of them are yellow. All these colors are because of a special organelle which is found only in plant cells. If you have guessed it as chromoplasts, you are right. If you have guessed it as plastids, that also makes you right. So, because plastids are special type of organelles which are found only in plant cells, they are full of pigments, which gives this beautiful coloration during the autumn season, especially in Western countries. When you go to there where the temperate countries, where the temperature differences are very pronounced. So, those places, during the autumn, the seasons are very pronounced. So, after summer comes autumn. So, at that time the leaves will show beautiful colors. Okay, that is all because you can thank that beauty to the chromoplasts, which are a type of plastids. Okay. So, these are a type of plastids. So, what are plastids? Okay, let us talk about plastids in detail now. So, plastids are also a little bit weird in the sense that they are also made up of two membranes. Okay. So, plastids are basically two types of plastids. Okay. So, one type of plastids are called as chromoplasts. Chromoplast, which means it's a colored plastid. Okay, colored plastids. So, one type of this colored plastids are only called as chloroplasts. Why they are called chloroplasts? Because they have that green color. That green color is because of the pigment which is called as chlorophyll. So this chlorophyll is what makes this the chloroplast green, and that's what gives the leaves that green color. So the green color is always because of a type of chromoplast called as chloroplasts. Okay, so the main pigment they have, the chloroplasts have, is chlorophyll, though they have some other brownish and orangish pigments, but majority of the chloroplast is made up of chlorophyll, which is the green pigment. And then other type of plastid is known as leucoplast. So what do leucoplasts do? So leucoplasts generally store, they are colorless. They don't have any pigment, so they are colorless. If they don't have any pigment means they will be colorless. So what they do? They store the starch. Sometimes they store starch, they store lipids, so oils, those kind of things. Starch, they may store starch. So that's what they do, storage organelle. You can call leucoplast as a storage organelle. Now let us talk about the structure of a plastid in general. So let us talk about chloroplasts, because chloroplasts are the main type of plastids which are used by the plant for a process called as photosynthesis. If you have said that, great. So this this photosynthesis is carried out by the chloroplasts. So the chloroplast structure, again, they are double membrane bound, but the inner membrane is not folded like mitochondria, but inside the cell, inside the organelle, you will find lot of membranous sacs like this, lot of membranous sacs like this. Okay, so like this. So these sacs are also connected with membranous, another membranous sac. So like this, lot of them are found. So these sacs are green in color. They contain all the chloroplasts. Okay. So these sacs are called as grana. And the matrix, whatever part is found inside is called as stroma. So the matrix is stroma and these things are called grana. And they have double membrane, and they are just like mitochondria. One more commonality they have is they have their own DNA, and then they have their own ribosomes. This is the commonality they have with mitochondria, right? So these two organelles, I always call them as strange organelles, the mitochondria and the plastids. You would know about it, why they have their own DNA and chloroplast later in your classes as you go higher up in your biology, right? So what makes them strange is presence of two membranes, presence of DNA, and presence of ribosomes, right? So that means chloroplasts can also make some of their own proteins. So let me just summarize the chloroplast structure. Okay, so there are two types of plastids: chromoplasts, which are colored; leucoplast, colorless plastids. Chromoplasts contain the pigment chlorophyll and they are known as chloroplast. Chloroplasts are important for photosynthesis. Chloroplasts also contain various yellow and orange pigments in addition to chlorophyll. So leucoplasts are primarily organelles in which materials like starch, oils and proteins are stored, which I have told you already. Okay, so look at this chloroplast. This is how it looks. Okay, so you can see the two membranes, then you can see the stacks of grana, and then you can see stroma inside. Though the DNA is not visible in this picture, but it is definitely there with the ribosomes. So it is there. So the internal organization of the chloroplast consists of numerous membrane layers, grana, embedded in a material called stroma. So these are similar to mitochondria in external structure. Like mitochondria, plastids have their own DNA and ribosomes. So that's about plastids. Now let's move on and we'll talk about another interesting organelle, which is actually known as vacuole. So if you see the plant cell again, so the plant cell have the biggest vacuole. See, about 50 to 90% of the plant cell is occupied by this big vacuole. And inside the vacuole, you might be wondering what is there, why it is occupying so much. So definitely there is water, but apart from that, there is a lot of other minerals, there are some amino acids, there are some sugars, some organic acids, some proteins. It's a mixture of so many things which are important for the life. Okay, it is stored in the vacuole. It's a mineral. It's a solution. It is just not pure water. It's a solution. It has a lot of minerals. It has a lot of amino acids, sugars, and organic acids. So, and why is it so important for a plant? What is the significance of this such a big vacuole in the plant, right? So, there, whatever is the content of the vacuole, it is called as cell sap. Remember this, the content of the vacuole, that solution what I spoke to you right now is called as cell sap. Now, what is the contribution of vacuole to the plant cell? The contribution is it actually provides turgidity and rigidity to the cell. So, the plant cell is able to be firm and rigid because of this vacuole full of water. The cell sap, okay. So, it gives rigidity, and this one I already told you, it's a storage organelle where you can store all these amino acid, sugars and various cells. So, this is about the vacuole in the plant cell. So, plant cells have the biggest vacuoles, but if you compare to the animal cells may have tiny vacuoles, but sometimes they may not have any vacuole at all. But then the vacuoles are also important, especially in unicellular organisms, okay. So, that's what I am going to talk about now. So, plant cell vacuoles definitely are important, but vacuoles also play, they are single membrane bound, huh? They are not weird like mitochondria and chloroplast. They are just made of single membrane, and the vacuoles have mainly in unicellular organisms, right, this vacuoles have a function. Like for example, can you name one of the unicellular organisms? If you have said amoeba, good, or paramecium, also good, okay. So, amoeba, let's take amoeba for example. So, in amoeba, right, so it is shapeless organism with like lot of pseudopod, it's easy to draw. Right. So, inside the amoeba, whenever amoeba eats up food, right, so it extends the pseudopodia around it like this, and then it takes the food in. When it takes the food in, it forms a small membrane bound structure with the food inside. So, this is called as food vacuole. So, this is what you find in unicellular organisms, one type of small vacuole called as food vacuole, which is formed when the food is engulfed by a process called as endocytosis. Then the food becomes food vacuole. And then lysosomes come and digest the food in this, okay. Now, that is one type of vacuole what you find in unicellular organisms, but apart from that, do they have one more? Definitely yes, they have one more vacuole which is little bigger, and that vacuole is called as contractile vacuole. Contractile vacuole. So, what does it do? So, this contractile vacuole actually absorbs, whenever the amoeba lives in water. So, whenever extra water enters into the cell, so this contractile vacuole absorbs all that extra water and then goes and fuses with the cell membrane and release all the water out. It's like, it maintains the water balance of the cell. Otherwise, what would happen? So much water enters and then amoeba might burst open, right? So, to avoid that, so the contractile vacuole takes in all the extra water, goes, fuses with the plasma membrane and releases all the water out. So, continuously maintaining constant amount of water inside the amoeba cell. So, it plays a major role in maintaining water balance. So, let us look at the vacuole in unicellular organisms, right. You can see this picture. In this, you can clearly see the food vacuole as well as the contractile vacuole. Okay. So the food vacuole contains the food items that amoeba has consumed. In some unicellular organisms, including amoeba, the specialized vacuoles also play an important role in expelling excess water and some waste from the cell. So this way they play a major role. So that is about the vacuoles inside the cell. To sum up, so what is that we have discussed until now? We have discussed various organelles in the cell. So we have discussed about the nucleus, we have discussed mitochondria, we discussed the cell wall, we discussed about the chloroplast, we discussed Golgi, endoplasmic reticulum, lysosomes, vacuoles. Phew, we are done. Okay, so that's about the cell organelles.